I ran a simple DNA test to help my family, and discovered my kids weren't mine. But instead of screaming, I documented everything. And then, I destroyed every single person who lied to me. The golden light of early evening filtered through the windows of the Rhodes family's suburban home, casting a warm glow on the polished surfaces of the kitchen. Callan Rhodes stood at the head of the dining table, arranging 4 DNA kits with clinical precision. A veteran of biomedical research, Callan's every movement carried the calm focus of a man used to measuring the world in microns and molecules. "Let's gather around," he called, his voice steady and even. His wife, Vera Quinn, entered with the smooth composure she always carried after a long day at her law firm. Her dark tailored suit hugged her frame impeccably, her expression unreadable behind perfectly curated poise. Their children trailed in behind her, 12-year-old Ramona, with her distinctive curls and keen, questioning eyes, and 10-year-old Jasper, nose still buried in his handheld game console. Callan had presented the test as part of a new research project, an ancestry mapping study that promised lifetime health insights for participants. He didn't mention the subtle disquiet he'd been nursing for years. Ramona's features that leaned more Mediterranean than Scottish German, Jasper's complexion darker than genetics on either side would suggest. There had always been explanations, Vera's talk of distant heritage, recessive traits, but science had trained him not to ignore patterns. Vera hesitated for a fraction of a second before agreeing to participate. Her polished nails tapped once on the table, betraying a flicker of resistance. Callan noticed but said nothing. One by one, he collected the samples, labeling each with practiced ease. Jasper went first, eyes barely leaving his game. Ramona followed, watching the process with analytic curiosity. Vera sat last, her posture straight, her lips tight. Callan noted her discomfort as he took the sample, a slight tension in her jaw, the way her eyes flicked to her buzzing phone and then quickly away. He added his own sample to the envelope and sealed it with meticulous care. The test kits would be dropped off at his private lab the next day, routine, sterile, and detached. At least on the surface. 3 weeks passed. Life unfolded in its usual rhythm. School pickups, late-night legal meetings, scientific reviews. But beneath that routine, Callan waited. And when the results came in, he read them not as a father, but as a scientist. The data was clear, and its implications devastating. Neither child shared his genetic markers. Both exhibited strong Southern European lineage, specifically Italian, unmistakable, unchangeable. He read the reports again, ran the control tests, recalibrated the algorithms. The outcome remained constant. He looked at the images of their faces with new eyes, Jasper's angular jawline, Ramona's deep-set eyes, both unmistakably echoing features he now recognized. Derek Marino, Vera's longtime mentor, the managing partner at her firm, a man who had gradually entwined himself in their lives under the guise of professionalism and mentorship. The tennis lessons he offered Ramona, the way Jasper lit up when Uncle Derek came around. It all formed a pattern Callan had once been too trusting to see. That night, as Vera arrived home with the faint scent of unfamiliar cologne trailing behind her, Callan sat in his home office, alone. He opened a new digital file and labeled it Project Clarion. He began with dates, when Vera's late nights had begun to increase, when Ramona started tennis training, when Jasper's school reports praised his sudden academic improvement following private tutoring. Callan cataloged everything. The betrayal was not impulsive. It was constructed, deliberate, and masked by years of routine. As the family moved through their lives, meals, school, holidays, Callan wore his silence like armor, observing with the detachment of a man documenting the slow collapse of something he had once trusted. Vera continued her evening meetings, her professional veneer unshaken. Ramona shared updates about Uncle Derek's plans to help her get a tennis scholarship. Jasper repeated Marino's offhand wisdom as though quoting a philosopher. And Callan took notes. At his lab the next week, he intercepted a conversation from a young associate about genetic discrepancies in one of the family groupings. He didn't hesitate. Mark the samples as contaminated, he said calmly. Family Group 7 is being withdrawn. He watched as the records were erased, his own name removed from the family database. He needed no one else to validate the truth he already carried like a tumor beneath his ribs. Back home, he observed Vera more closely. Her guarded smiles, the subtle way she angled her phone when messaging, the names she mentioned too casually, the ones she avoided. The patterns continued. This wasn't over. Callan had built his career on the foundation of precise observation and well-timed execution. Now, he would use those same skills not to cure but to expose. The data didn't lie, and soon neither would anyone else. Callan Rhodes maintained a veneer of normalcy as the days passed, though internally he operated with the precision of a man dissecting a living organism. Every moment, every glance became a data point. The deception wasn't limited to his wife. It extended like a virus through their social circle, infecting friendships, routines, even memories. He hired Lucia Wren, a private investigator with a reputation for surgical efficiency. They met in a quiet cafe 2 towns over. Callan brought a file thin but damning. DNA reports, photographs, appointment logs. "I need everything," he said. "Bank transfers, phone logs, hotel records. I want to know who helped and who watched." Lucia's investigation unfolded methodically. Within days, she discovered that Vera maintained a second phone, paid for through a shell company listed as Mr. Consulting, a name that nearly made Callan laugh. The phone was hidden in her office drawer at the law firm. The payment trail went back over a decade. Hotel records followed. High-end establishments booked under corporate accounts, conveniently disguised as depositions or legal retreats. The names associated with the bookings? Derek Marino and Adrian Wells, Callan's best friend since university. A man who had stood beside him at his wedding. A man who had signed off on reservation after reservation. He covered for them, Lucia said flatly, sliding copies of the receipts across the table. He created entire alibis. The therapist they'd seen during their marital rough patches, Dr. Mira Halden, had also played a role. Recovered emails painted a disturbing picture. She had coached Vera and Derek on how to maintain the affair while keeping Callan emotionally tethered to the marriage. Sessions described as couples therapy were, in reality, co-conspirator strategy meetings. Lucia found more. Photographs from supposed sister weekends at Vera's relative's beach house, where Derek's vehicle was parked in the driveway. Academic recommendation letters for Ramona, allegedly written by school faculty, were actually ghostwritten by Marino, leveraging his connections to elite prep schools. Each piece fit into a grotesque mosaic. The betrayal wasn't a single crack. It was a structural failure. Callan documented every detail in encrypted files. Dates, times, connections. It was a forensic operation masquerading as a marriage. He monitored the children's routines with a new lens. Ramona's tennis coaching sessions were consistently supervised by Marino. Jasper's science projects bore language and structuring suspiciously similar to Marino's alma mater publications. The man hadn't just infiltrated Callan's family, he had colonized it. The social network surrounding them, once a vibrant web of shared holidays and mutual support, revealed its complicity through casual texts and emails Lucia recovered. Friends joked about how Callan was too into his lab work to notice anything, while privately coordinating schedules to keep the illusion alive. The deeper the investigation went, the clearer it became. Callan hadn't merely been betrayed by a spouse. He had been made the unwitting centerpiece of a long-running theater of lies. His children were characters in a story rewritten behind his back. His friends, collaborators in the greatest experiment he'd never consented to. Late one evening, as Ramona showed him a new tennis trophy, another gift from Uncle Derek, Callan smiled. Encouraging, warm. But inside, he logged the event with the same emotional detachment he brought to observing bacterial cultures. Vera's voice drifted in from the kitchen, discussing case law with someone over speakerphone. Derek's name came up too casually. That night, in his home office, Callan watched security footage from a camera Lucia had installed outside a luxury apartment building registered under Marino's Shell Corporation. Vera entered the building every Thursday afternoon, sometimes weekends. Her patterns, like her lies, were reliable. The next morning, he uploaded a new entry to his encrypted report. Day 18. Subject V continues behavioral patterns consistent with long-term concealment. Subject D observed as primary collaborator. Subject A, former close contact, complicit through direct facilitation. Children remain unaware. Begin compiling list of ethical violations for professional exposure. Callan sipped his coffee as the sun crept across the sky. His mind operated in complete silence now, cold, methodical, resolute. He had no intention of confronting anyone prematurely. Precision was his advantage. Timing his weapon. Justice wouldn't come through rage. It would arrive through documentation, exposure, and the slow unraveling of every thread his wife and her lover had so carefully woven. He was no longer seeking the truth. He was preparing to release it. Callan Rhodes continued his daily life with the same exacting routine he'd practiced for years, but beneath the surface, every action was calculated. His wife prepared breakfast as if nothing had changed. Ramona chatted about her latest tennis session, proudly recounting Derek Marino's praise. Jasper worked on a coding project, one Derek had supposedly inspired during a weekend mentorship retreat. Callan listened, nodded, and filed it all away. Lucia Wren, his investigator, delivered weekly reports with devastating consistency. She uncovered financial records showing that Derek had been quietly paying tuition fees, sports club memberships, and even grocery bills through indirect shell company reimbursements. Trust funds had been created for Ramona and Jasper, on paper listed as godparent gifts, but deeper analysis revealed Marino as the source. Even the family's holiday cabin in the mountains, which Callan had thought was part of a shared inheritance from Vera's side, had been partially purchased using funds from one of Derek's shadow accounts. Lucia's latest findings shook him more than expected. Email threads between his so-called friends revealed coordinated efforts to keep the truth from him. Declan Hart, Adrian Wells, and Mira Halden all contributed to this carefully maintained illusion. There were jokes about Callan's devotion to research, backhanded comments suggesting he was too logical to ever suspect an emotional betrayal. There were more. Screenshots of social media posts from gatherings Callan hadn't been invited to. Vera standing beside Derek with the children, labeled in captions as the perfect team or proud family moments. Each post another nail in a coffin constructed from loyalty and delusion. Ramona's school records listed Marino as an emergency contact, bypassing Callan entirely. Jasper's Science Club had been funded by a program Marino sponsored through his firm. Every pathway the children had taken had been quietly redirected. It was no longer just betrayal, it was a usurpation. Callan sat in his home office, the monitor filled with organized folders. Digital receipts, email logs, surveillance footage, legal summaries. He had created a system of pure evidence, each click a quiet act of vengeance. He met with Ivy Kessler, a family law specialist with a reputation for dismantling complex custody cases. Her expression shifted from professional curiosity to steely focus as Callan laid out the full scope of deception. "This isn't an affair," Ivy said, flipping through Lucia's documentation. "This is coordinated identity theft. They replaced you in your own home." Callan nodded. "And now I replace their future." He also met with Dr. Talia Noor, a clinical ethics advisor, and presented evidence of Mira Halden's involvement in the deception. Talia reviewed the records and confirmed multiple violations of professional codes, enough to initiate proceedings to revoke Myra's license. Meanwhile, Vera continued playing the role of devoted mother and accomplished attorney. She made casual references to work dinners, late filings, mentoring sessions, all while maintaining an illusion she believed was still intact. Callan reviewed security footage of Vera entering Derek's private apartment. Same time every Thursday, sometimes Saturdays. She wore the same coat she kissed her children goodnight in. In a new encrypted entry, he wrote, "Day 31. Subjects continue established routines. Observable patterns indicate complete lack of suspicion. Subject V unaware of surveillance. Subject D demonstrates increasing involvement in children's educational and personal planning. Begin legal strategy draft." The next afternoon, Ramona mentioned Derek helping her research colleges. "He knows people," she said. "He says with his connections, I could get a scholarship early." Callan's voice remained warm. "That's great, sweetheart." But inside, he marked it as another point of encroachment. He knew the children weren't to blame. They were manipulated, coached, inoculated against suspicion, and they would need protection when the truth came to light. But not yet. Not until every angle had been sealed, every name accounted for. Lucia found something new: property records. Derek and Vera had purchased burial plots side by side, a decision made 3 years earlier. Even in death, they planned to exclude Callan. That night, as the house settled into silence, Callan opened a final folder titled Phase 3. Inside were documents outlining ethical violations, financial misconduct, corporate resource misuse, and a preliminary list of professional contacts to receive anonymous tips. He saved the file and encrypted it. The story they had written without him was ending. He would be the one to write the final chapter. The morning of the board presentation arrived with the sharp crispness of late autumn. Callan Rhodes adjusted his blood-red tie, the color chosen with intent. In his sleek black suit, he looked every bit the composed professional, but beneath the calm exterior lay the coiled energy of a man prepared for precision strike. The law firm where Vera Quinn and Derek Marino had spent over a decade building reputations occupied the top floors of a modern downtown tower. Callan entered the glass-walled conference room accompanied by Dr. Talia, Noor, and Ivy Kessler. The managing partners gathered around the long oak table, exchanging polite greetings, unaware of what was about to unfold. Derek welcomed him with performative warmth. "Dr. Rhodes, thank you for joining us. Vera mentioned your latest research is groundbreaking." "Appreciate the invitation," Callan replied, his tone neutral. The findings were indeed unexpected. He connected his laptop to the projector. Dr. Noor quietly pressed record on a small audio device hidden in her notebook. Callan began with a presentation on healthcare innovation, referencing genetic research and its implications for ancestry analysis. The partners listened with polite interest until the tone shifted. "Italian and Southern European markers," he explained, "are particularly distinct when isolated through modern DNA sequencing techniques, especially when cross-referenced against claims of alternate heritage." A slide appeared showing anonymized genetic maps. Callan didn't name names yet. Instead, he built the tension with methodical layering, data patterns, timelines, correlations. Then came the pivot. "Now," he continued, "consider what happens when those markers appear in two siblings, with zero overlap to the recorded father's genome." A silence settled across the room. Derek's face tightened. Click. Hotel receipts. Bank transfers. Shell companies. Corporate accounts misused for personal purposes. Click. Photos. Email threads. Meeting logs from law firm accounts. Time-stamped evidence that painted a picture far too detailed to ignore. Click. Surveillance stills. Vera entering Marino's private apartment. Dates aligned with missed family events. Receipts for wine, dinners, and overnight stays all cross-referenced to company-funded trips. The faces around the table shifted from confusion to discomfort. One of the senior partners leaned forward, expression grim. "Dr. Rhodes, are you alleging financial misconduct within this firm?" "I'm documenting it," Callan replied coldly. "Years of it. With one of your own facilitating personal affairs through firm resources, falsified billing hours, and professional deception." Vera entered mid-sentence, stopping dead as her eyes landed on the projected image. A photo of her and Derek in a hotel suite lobby, time-stamped and labeled. She didn't speak. Her expression said enough. Derek stood abruptly. "This is a private matter. Irrelevant to—" "Sit down," the managing partner interrupted. "This is no longer private." Ivy Kessler handed Vera a folder, divorce papers, complete with documentation of paternity fraud, financial concealment, and coordinated manipulation. "You're advised to review these before choosing litigation," Ivy said. "The alternative is full exposure in court, including expert testimony and press coverage." The firm acted swiftly. Within hours, Derek's access was revoked. His resignation was processed under threat of scandal. Vera took personal leave, though the partners privately agreed she wouldn't return. Callan's move wasn't emotional, it was procedural. Every step had been prepared, each document vetted. The court filings, licensing complaints, and ethical board submissions followed within 24 hours. Dr. Mira Halden's license was suspended pending investigation. Adrian Wells faced audit reviews. Declan Hart lost his consultancy contract with a key client after anonymous disclosures revealed his role. Callan returned home that evening to the quiet hum of routine. Ramona and Jasper were doing homework. Vera wasn't home. He helped Ramona with her science project and listened as Jasper talked about a school debate. They didn't know yet, but they would soon. In his study, he wrote a final entry for the day. Day 46. Operation Transition initiated. Phase 4 begins. Subjects V and D neutralized professionally. Legal repercussions in motion. Final phase. Family realignment and support integration. He looked out the window into the falling dusk. The world they had built on lies was unraveling. And Callan wasn't finished yet. 5 years later, Callan Rhodes stood at the back of a crowded university lecture hall in Northern California, watching his daughter present her first research paper in molecular biology. Ramona moved through her presentation with confident precision, pointing to graphs and speaking about inherited traits with the same clarity her father had once used in boardrooms and laboratories. The applause was loud and genuine. Her professor beamed. Callan caught her eye and smiled. She smiled back, pure, unburdened. After the lecture, the three of them, Callan, Ramona, and Jasper, walked across campus. Jasper, now in high school, had developed an interest in computer science. He was quieter than his sister, but no less focused. He spoke of pattern recognition algorithms, projects he was developing to detect fraud in financial systems, and a summer coding camp he'd been accepted into. Their paths were their own now, free from manipulation, shaped by truth. They stopped by a newsstand where a legal ethics journal lay displayed. The cover story detailed the permanent disbarment of Derek Marino, citing years of professional misconduct and ethics violations, along with precedent-setting decisions in family court. Callan didn't need to read it. He had helped write the ending. Ramona glanced at it, indifferent. "He tried to message me on my birthday last year," she said. "I didn't respond." Callan placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't owe him anything." Marino now worked in a small legal office in a remote town in Nevada, handling minor disputes and property cases. His days of influence were long gone. The luxury, the power, the carefully curated image collapsed into dust. Vera Quinn hadn't fared much better. After the scandal, her license was suspended, her legal career imploded. She had tried to re-establish herself in another state, but the records followed her. She now worked as a paralegal in a storefront firm, far from her once coveted office. Their marriage had lasted 2 years. Financial stress, social exile, and resentment ate through whatever illusion of love had remained. By the time they split, the trust funds Marino had set up had already been reassigned, transferred to college savings accounts under Callan's management. Ramona and Jasper had chosen to stay with their father. Court-appointed therapists had supported their decision. Supervised visits faded, then disappeared. Eventually, the children stopped answering messages. Letters from Vera went unopened. Calls were left unreturned. The social circle that once shielded the deception had fractured entirely. Declan Hart's career had collapsed under the weight of disclosure. Adrian Wells relocated and divorced. Mira Halden lost her license permanently, her appeals denied. She had tried to rebrand as a life coach, but nothing held. Even the schools had changed. After uncovering how Derek Marino had manipulated board admissions, the Prep Academy implemented new policies. The chairman, Marino's brother, had resigned quietly. Lucia Wren, the investigator who helped Callan uncover the truth, had retired to a quiet home by the coast. Every December, she sent a card with a newspaper clipping of another failed appeal by Marino or a quote about integrity. Ivy Kessler, now one of the most in-demand legal minds in the country, often cited the Rhodes case in lectures and white papers on ethical law practice. Callan returned home that evening to a small but peaceful house surrounded by redwoods. A framed photo on his desk showed Ramona holding a science award and Jasper with a medal from his coding competition. In the background stood Callan, proud and silent. A sealed letter sat beside the photo, another from Vera, never opened. It would join the others in the drawer he never revisited. Later, over dinner, Jasper brought up a new app he was designing. It detects inconsistencies in story timelines, he explained, based on speech patterns and data trails. Could help people figure out who's lying. Callan raised his glass. To clarity, then. Ramona nodded. To the truth. Always. They clinked their glasses together. The genetic test that once threatened to destroy everything had instead rebuilt something stronger. Callan had turned betrayal into freedom, silence into strategy, and loss into legacy. Not a single public word had been spoken. No interviews, no books, no headlines. Just methodical exposure and permanent consequences. In the end, science had revealed what love had concealed. And Callan Rhodes had made sure the truth stayed permanent.